All right. Good day to all of you. My name is Mark. Welcome to Village Church. How y'all doing? Doing okay? All right, good stuff. Across all of our sites, if you are in Langley or Surrey here, or Calgary or North Langley, good to have you guys. We are Masterclass. This is number 11, and so we're jumping into a passage that's very important. So 1 Corinthians chapter 2 is where we are, and let me start out by saying this. Have you guys ever, I realized this about myself this week. I was walking to my car in like a parking garage, and it was dark, and my mind immediately jumped into like I'm part of a horror movie. Have you ever, is that just me? Like literally I feel like I'm just like going along in life, kind of doing things normal, and all of a sudden it's like, oh man, it's dark around me, and I'm waiting. It's like I'm trying to find my key, and it's like and I can't get the right key, and it's like all I can hear in my brain is like, I'm like, oh my goodness, and I'm waiting for like a dude with a mask and these big claws to just come on and go, what's up, playa? All right, just from around the corner. I don't know. Does that happen to you? What? You guys are nuts. All right, so all of a sudden I'm in a horror. Now, obviously that's all in our head. And the reality, we're wrong. It's not actually reality. And that is really kind of how most people have come to the passage we're going to look at today, meaning the way they take it is actually not really what the text is about, and it's in their head, and they've kind of made it in the history of the church has actually shown. They've tried to make this text into something that it's really not. It's kind of imaginary in their brain. Actually, one scholar puts it this way. Gordon Fee says, this passage has endured a most unfortunate history of application in the church. Almost every form of spiritual elitism, deeper life movement, second blessing, hyper-charismatic doctrine has appealed to this text, even though it is nearly 180 degrees the opposite of Paul's intent. And so what I mean is, I'll read the text for you, and then we'll begin to see what that might be talking about. So 1 Corinthians chapter 2, start in verse 6. I'll just read the whole text, and then I'll work through it with you. He says in verse 6, yet among the mature, we do not impart wisdom. We do impart wisdom, although it is not a wisdom of this age or of the rulers of this age who are doomed to pass away, but we impart a secret and hidden wisdom of God, which God decreed before the ages for our glory. None of the rulers of this age understood this, for if they had, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. But as it is written, what no eye has seen, nor ear heard, nor the heart of man imagined, what God has prepared for those who love him, these things God has revealed to us through the Spirit. For the Spirit searches everything, even the depths of God. For who knows a person's thoughts except the spirit of that person which is in him? So also no one comprehends the thoughts of God except the Spirit of God. Now we have received not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit who is from God, that we might understand the things freely given us by God. And we impart this in words not taught by human wisdom, but taught by the Spirit, interpreting spiritual truths to those who are spiritual. The natural person does not accept the things of the Spirit of God, for they are folly to him, and he is not able to understand them because they are spiritually discerned. The spiritual person judges all things, but is himself to be judged by no one. So the idea here is there's a whole world and movement that has taken a passage like this and said that we are, because we know God, because we're spiritual, because we have the Spirit, because we do this, that ergo, I'm more special than you. And so I have these experiences, I speak in these languages, I see these miracles, I see these things among us. Ergo, among the saints, among Christians, I'm actually special. I'm different than you. I have a different experience. You lack these experiences from the Spirit or whatever it is. And so you're worse off than me. And then, of course, people have also taken the spiritual elitism and say, well, my church grows faster than yours, or we have cool lights or better music, or we do and we create this kind of elitism among the church. We have this judgment categories of people who are further along than those people based on experience. And the reality is Paul now comes along, and from everything he said from chapter 2, verse 1 on, he's been focusing on the reality of the cross and trying to say the ground is totally level at the foot of the cross. And so all of you need to be humble, because if you actually even know God, it has nothing to do with you. It has to do with him. And that's what I've been pounding the last 3 or 4 weeks, because that's what he's been talking about. And so he comes at this now, and his application should be, listen, you Pentecostals, you Baptists, you Charismatics, you Reformed, you liberals, you conservatives, shut up. That's his application. All right? Good night. So the reality is he's saying, if the ground is totally level at the foot of the cross, then how dare you have a spiritual elitism and say we're right and they're wrong. We have this further expression of, I have this greater experience than you, and ergo, you're worse off than me. He says, listen, we need to be humble. We need to actually understand what God has done for us and be humble. Similar to, like, I look at my dog walking around. I've had a dog for about a year and a half. And here's the thing, man, I serve this dog, but he still walks around like he owns the place, and it kind of ticks me off. Like we have this, I don't know how we don't have a dog door in our back door going outside. So we have this, my wife came up with this, it's like a ribbon, and it's got these bells on the bottom of it. And so this dog just rings some stinking bells to let me know, like I'm further up the creation food chain than this thing, all right? I'm a man, all right? You're a dog. You were bred in complete, cold-hearted reality, and now you walk around my house. Everyone likes you more than me, and you just walk up to these bells. I'm telling you, the look on her face, and she just rings these just jing, jing, jing. I can hear it anywhere at all times. Jing, 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 jing. And that means, and then she just sits there and looks at me. I'm like, what do you want, man? So I have to go, I have to open the door. She just saunters out, takes her time, kind of puts her bum up at me in my face, and then goes out and hangs. And then I shut the door and I get into work and I'm in the zone again. And then it's ding, ding, ding from the outside. I'm like, and I open the door and she just walks in and then gets up on the couch and just sits there and looks at me. And I'm like, you think you own this place? And I've started to resent her over time. But the point is if I have served her and helped her and done this thing, why is she acting all proud? She should be humble, right? And this is the reality that Paul's trying to say. If God has saved you, if God has done everything for you, you shouldn't be walking around like you own the place. Shut up, be humble, realize it's the cross that brought you to your heart. And so here's the irony that Paul's trying to say. He's trying to look at the church and go, here's the crazy thing. You guys have thought that there's a special group within the church that's more elite and better off, and you're special within the church. And what he's going to say now, and what he's been trying to say, is there is no special group within the church. What you are is you are special out from the world, not in among the church. You are special among the world because God has saved you through his Spirit. And now we know, he's going to say in the passage, who the covenant people of God are. We can look in the present and say, who are they? So it's not about being special in regard to one another. It's about being special and called out from among the world. So here's verse 6. So all of that background, the cross is there. It totally humbles you. And now he says this, okay? Verse 6, yet among the mature. All right, that word mature, he's about to say there's a whole bunch of people who thought they were so smart and intelligent they were going to reason their way to God. And of course, he's critiqued all of that. And now he's saying, but I'm the Apostle Paul, and I'm not just here to critique reason. I'm not just here to tell you science isn't going to get you the answer. Art's not going to get you the answer. Technology is not going to give you the answer. I'm actually here to give you some really good ideas of what does work. There is a group of people who I'm going to call mature, and they've actually understand the wisdom of God, even though it's upside down and backwards, and they're now mature. Now, here's what he's going to say, though. Okay, so last summer, my wife and I went to New York for some meetings, and we went to the Met, all right? Have you guys been to the Met before? Okay, the museum. And so the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and so we went there. There's all this beautiful artwork, and here's the thing, man, like, my wife and I, we don't have like, our appetite, our palate for art is not mature. Let's just put it that way, all right? So we go there, and we're standing in front of Rembrandts and Van Goghs, all right? And my wife's like, just like checking her Instagram, like, oh, look at so-and-so went to the beach today. And it's like, it's lost on us, all right? I'm standing in front of these ancient Greek statues, right? That like people are like, my gosh, then they study them. And I'm embarrassed because the guy's naked in the statue. And I'm like doing the selfies, like covering up his stuff and going, So when we got back to the hotel, I was kind of like, that might have been wasted on us. I'm not going to lie. Like something about the beauty of that art, our palate for art is not very mature. This is wasted on us probably. And here's what Paul's about to say. When it comes to the cross, this is what he's talked about in the first 5 verses. When it comes to the cross of Christ, there's a group of, the world is basically divided between two types of people. The people who aren't mature enough to grasp the beauty and the foolishness and the upside down reality of the cross, and those that are. And so there's a group of people who, when it comes to the cross of Christ, and this might be some of you as you sit here right now, taking the Masterclass of life, trying to figure your life out, trying to explore spirituality. We're glad you're here. You might come from you're an atheist, you're an agnostic, you're a Buddhist, you're a Muslim, you're Jewish, or whatever it is, and you're exploring Christianity. And what Paul says is, look, there's people who are gonna look at the cross and their palate is never going to understand it. They're never going to appreciate it. So what do? They're going to walk right by it. They're going to look at their phones. They're going to laugh at it. They're going to think it's silly, and they're going to move on. But then there's going to be a group of people, and the world is divided between these two people who get it, who are mature, who grasp the wisdom, who looked at the Van Gogh and said, my gosh, this is what, who look at the cross and say, this is life-changing. This defines everything about my life. Literally, the world is divided between those two people. And the question of this text is, which one are you? He goes on to verse 14 to define it, spiritual and natural. There are spiritual people, there are natural people, people who just live according to the world and live the way that they were born, and they've never done anything else with that. And then there are people who actually have what he calls the Spirit of God. And he says those people, they get it. They understand a kind of wisdom. There is something that is true and something that is real. There is real maturity. But the reality of everything he says is the way you get real maturity is by being humble. The way you get real maturity is by coming at God, not saying, I'm so smart, I'm so wonderful. It's like Jesus in Matthew 18 when he says, in order to get into the kingdom, you have to become like a what? Like a child, which always fascinates me because children are dumb, right? Some kid is saying, nah, mama, take me to a different church, right? Because I literally, my kids yesterday, my daughter was going to do she was going into the studio to record this music thing. So it's really important and a great moment for her. So I gathered all the kids up. I got my 12-year-old going to the studio. I got 10-year-old, 7.5-year-old. And I said, we're going to pray for my oldest. We're just going to pray for her. She has a great day. And my two youngest are like, oh, can I go upstairs? I'm like, what do you mean we're going to pray? They're like, oh, this is so boring, prayer. I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to watch out for this. All right, you're pastor's kids. You're going to enjoy prayer and cherish it at every moment. All right. And so the reality is, I'm like, man, Jesus wants us to become like them? That's crazy. But the reality is, he says, you got to become like a child. You got to actually become humble. Because then and only then you're going to understand true wisdom. And then he says this, although it is not a wisdom of this age, right? Meaning you have the world and the wisdom of the cross, the wisdom of Christ is actually different than the wisdom of this age. And the reality is, some of you are defined by the wisdom of this age. You would basically say to yourself, look, I've studied philosophy, I only believe things. This was my family growing up, right? This is most of my friends. That I only believe things according to evidence. I'm not a person of faith. Maybe you're somebody who says that. You're an agnostic, you're an atheist, you're a naturalist. You think that you don't believe things by faith. There are people of faith and there are people who actually study science and objective reality, and that's who you are. And the reality is, every time I sit down with those people, I want to point out to them the naivety and the blind spot of their own life. Because so much about your life is reason that you've actually come to based on prior faith commitments. That you have a whole bunch of prior faith commitments that actually cause you to do certain things, but you don't even recognize those faith commitments. For instance, one example of this would be the reason that depends on faith, that our cognitive senses, our seeing, our hearing, our memory, our mind, that those things are not playing tricks on us, that those things are actually giving us input into reality. That's a faith commitment. There's actually, now we're going to do a bit of a philosophy thing here, so don't freak out. Make sure you got your coffee and don't go into like a existential crisis. But the point is there is really no way, and I don't mean to sound like your first year philosophy 101 professor at university, but there really is no way for you to prove that you haven't lived a life at all, that you were born yesterday, and you were downloaded with all the memories that you've had of your entire life, and you are a brain sitting in a canister with wires coming out of your brain right now. You have no way of proving that at all. That isn't non-circular. So you can't actually reason your way to deduce that all your memories haven't been downloaded, that you literally are a brain in a vat. There is no way for you to prove that at all. Your reason cannot prove it, because the reality is your reason could have been programmed, and your memory, you have no way of proving that your memory is not playing tricks on you. That's not completely non-circular, because you have to use your memory in order to prove that your memory is not, inputted into your brain. And the reality is there are different ways to view the world. So you're a Westerner, right? So you're a Westerner and you believe that the universe is part of a closed system. You believe that everything is a deduction of naturalistic processes. You believe that matter created mind. All of these things you believe because you're reading the prompter of the Western culture you were born in. They give you education, they put it on the news, they give you all these things. You read the prompter, you buy into it, and you move on with your life. The reality is, most of the world doesn't believe those kind of things. A Hindu philosophy would say that the universe was born out of an absolute spirit, and most of it's an illusion, and you can't actually trust it, and the only way to ever understand it is through meditation and contemplation. You literally have no way of proving which one of those is actually true. You have prior faith commitments that cause you to go into those things, but you can't actually prove that the Hindu philosophy is not right, because of course, if most of life is an illusion, if you could say, well, look, the data doesn't say that way. It's like, yeah, the data's an illusion. Just like pain, it's Maya. It's an illusion in your brain. You actually have my point is this, you have all kinds of faith commitments that are actually deduced not through your pure objective rational reason, because you're just so smart. You were just born into a reality. You have no agenda in life. You just walk through as a blank slate and collect data because you're so intelligent. And Paul just went, no, you don't. Your whole life is a faith commitment. The question is, are you willing to maybe take on the conclusion that you're not the smartest one in the universe, and God actually exists, and he came down and died for you? As messed up and backward and silly as that idea is, as foolish as it is actually the true wisdom. That's his argument. What looks like it's wrong is actually right. Now, the cross looks bad, it looks silly, it looks dumb. But in reality, what's true is that it's the most important. It's like, if I just said to you, I read this article this week, okay? I was trying to figure out a way to illustrate this. I read an article this week that talked about a flight attendant breastfeeding a child on a flight, all right? So, if you read that, you go, what? That's disgusting. What? That's icky. Like, who wants to breastfeed another person's child that's crazy, all right? Not her own child. So they can't take them to work. You know that, right? And so they're like, what's wrong with breastfeeding? No, so a passenger's kid, all right? Now, I had a buddy who actually, when he was young and he was in church, this was the 80s, so those were crazy times. He got dropped off in the nursery, and his mom got called a couple times, and she didn't see the call. And so the person just taking care of the nursery just breastfed him, all right? Just some random, kids worker, all right? So, lesson, if your number comes up, go get your kids, because you're gonna find someone breastfeeding them. So that's gross. It's disgusting. Why would you ever do that? And so I read this story, I'm like, oh my goodness, it's gross. And then I went and actually read the story. And it actually is a beautiful story. It's a story about a mom who was delayed like 10 hours. She totally ran out of breast milk. She's on the plane, the kid's crying. It's like a 7-hour flight. There's nothing that can be done. And the flight attendant had a baby at home, and she said, hey, look, I know it's a disaster, but do you want me to do this for you? And the mom was like over the moon and like, thank you. And then she did it, and the kid fell asleep. And now the kid's been crying out for that woman. But where's Janet? Janet! All right, so anyway, the point is, and this is the last time you'll ever hear me compare the cross to breastfeeding, but what looked like a really messed up thing and a backward thing and an upside down is actually a beautiful, life-giving thing, all right? And so what happens is you either get the brain at some point in your life where you mature and you take on the cross and say it's wisdom, it's beautiful, it's life, or you continuously look at it as foolishness and dumb. And so there's the people who take the actual wisdom of God, or there's the people who live according to the wisdom of this age, and they think, but the reality is you gotta be humble. You gotta actually go, I might be actually wrong about these things. And Paul is saying, I'm gonna give you a critique of pure reason, and I'm gonna say, The reality of, postmodernity has come along and said, well, we don't know anything. We should all just smoke weed and sleep around and go to Burning Man. And there is no such thing as truth. And Paul says, no. Reason can be deceptive, but I'm not just going to leave you in the world of postmodernity. I'm going to actually give you an answer. There is truth. There is reality. It is the cross. You need to organize your life around it. That's the reality. And so he says, if though you decide not to be the person of maturity, and you decide to live by the wisdom of this age, here's what's going to happen. The rulers of this age who are doomed to pass away. Here's the reality. Every artist, every technician, every great idea, every political solution to the world has died. Julius Caesar, he's a god. Julius Caesar died in his mid-50s. Steve Jobs, we thought that guy was invincible. This guy's gonna invent the world. Can you ever rewind the clock, 7, 8 years ago? Can you ever see Steve Jobs, just like the world without Steve Jobs? Not gonna happen. He's in his 50s, he's killing it, he's in his prime, dies, pancreatic cancer in his 50s. Christopher Hitchens, one of the great philosophers, not even an atheist, an anti-theist, hated Christianity, would debate the smartest Christians in the world and destroy them. British guy, the best debater. You go watch him don't believe any of his ideas are terrible. But just from a debating standpoint, he'd make you look foolish. He'd get up there and he'd quote T.S. Eliot and Chaucer, and he just with his English accent make you look so stupid, and he just had this way about it. He'd use words in such a beautiful way, and you were like, dude, Christopher Hitchens, this guy is a star. He's in his prime. Late 50s, flips over to 60, 61, and then gets esophagus cancer. Irony of irony, a man defined by his voice gets cancer that takes his voice away, and he wrote for Vanity Fair a couple months before he died. It's a few paragraphs, so just bear with me, but I want to read it to you. He says, on the less good days, I feel like that wooden-legged piglet belonging to a sadistically sentimental family that could bear to eat him only a chunk at a time, except that cancer isn't so considerate. Most despond-inducing and alarming of all so far was the moment when my voice suddenly rose to a childish squeak. It then began to register all over the place, from a gruff and a husky whisper to a papery, plaintive bleat, and at times it threatened, and now threatens daily, to disappear altogether. I had just returned from giving a couple of speeches in California where, with the help of morphine and adrenaline, I could still successfully project my utterances, when I made an attempt to hail a taxi outside my home and nothing happened. I stood frozen like a silly cat that had abruptly lost its meow. I used to be able to stop a New York cab at 30 paces. I could also, without the help of a microphone, reach the back row and gallery of a crowded debating hall. Like health itself, the loss of such a thing can't be imagined until it occurs. In common with everybody else, I have played versions of the youthful game, Which Would You Rather, in which most usually it's debated whether blindness or deafness would be the most oppressive. But I don't ever recall speculating much about being struck dumb, losing a voice. Deprivation of the ability to speak is more like an attack of impotence or the amputation of part of a personality. To a great degree, in public and private, I was my voice. All the rituals and etiquette of conversation, from clearing the throat in preparation for the telling of an extremely long and taxing joke, to trying to make my proposals more persuasive as I sank the tone of a strategic octave of shame, were innate and essential to me. I have never been able to sing, but I once recited poetry and could quote prose and was sometimes even asked to do so. And timing is everything. The exquisite moment when one can break in and cap a story, or tune a line for a laugh, or ridicule an opponent. I lived for moments like that. Now, if I want to enter a conversation, I have to attract attention in some other way and live with the awful fact that people are then listening sympathetically. Well, at least they don't have to pay attention for long. I can't keep it up, and anyway, can't stand to. The most pompous, brilliant debater maybe of our time lost his own voice became weak and died in his early 60s of esophagus cancer. Why? Because every great idea and wisdom of this age is going to pass away. It is doomed. It is inevitable. No matter how smart you think you are, no matter how inevitable you think your life is just going to be, that you are going to be here tomorrow. You ask the families in our church that over and over and over again have recognized that that just isn't true. That you can't count on tomorrow at all. And so the point is he's saying ultimately, all the wisdom of this age, no matter what it is, no matter how long you think it's going to be around, it will ultimately bow before God in awe. And the very fact that it actually disappears is a testimony shouting to the world to be humble and to be careful with what you actually think is reality. That's what he says. And so he says, here's what we need to be able to do. Verse 7. But we impart a secret and hidden wisdom of God, which God decreed before the ages. This is beautiful. Listen to this. You want to know what Christianity is about? You might have a version of God that he's mad and he's nasty and he's against you and he's not for you. Why did he do all of this? He had this decree. He did it all. Listen to what he did it for before the ages. For what? Our glory. That's beautiful. That the reason he unfolded all of this salvation story was for our glory. Because here's the thing. What do you and I want in the end? What do you and I live for? We live for pleasure. That's the biggest motivating factor of your life. Delight, goodness, love, joy, awe. These are the things we pine after. That's why you married who you married. That's why you try to make as much money as you can. That's why you have the house you have. That's why you set up. Who's got the Christmas lights up already? Across the sides, don't be shy. Raise them up. Raise them up. Yeah, I see you in Langley South. Yeah, in the red. You. Yeah, I see you. Okay, listen, I'm judging silently. Here's the thing. Why do you put up those Christmas lights and sit and make everything perfect every year? We're gonna get the turkey. We're gonna get everybody out of the fire. I'm gonna sit and I'm gonna read my books and drink my tea because it's dark by 4. Right? Why do we do all that? Sorry. Why do we do all that? It's because there's something innate in us that pines for a kind of pleasure and joy and delight that this world has no offer for you at all. So we take these moments and we call them nostalgia, or we call them adolescence, or we call them romanticism. But C.S. Lewis in his sermon, Way to Glory, said, don't call them that, man. What they are is they're a song from some country. They're an echo from a song you've never heard. It's news from a country you've never been to. It's a scent of a flower that you're trying to find. It's built into you. Yeah, it's nostalgia because you've been there in the garden and God has moved in Jesus Christ so he can take you from the pain and the suffering and the agony and the awfulness and the anguish and the loneliness of your present situation. Some of you lost loved ones. This is the first Christmas you're gonna face without them. Some of you have got a diagnosis even this week or will get one next week. And he says there is a world, Romans chapter 8, Revelation 21 and 22, where there's no more pain, there's no more crying, there's no more disease. It is absolute delight, pleasure, and perfection in all things. I don't have time to get into it, but the reality is he has created this new creation that people who believe in Jesus actually go there and they experience the kind of crazy pleasure and delight that we can't. I mean, look at what he quotes in verse 9, as it is written, what no eye has seen, no ear heard, nor the heart of man imagined. He's created a reality that you and I have never been able to imagine something as glorious. Think about that, because you and I have imagined a lot of crazy, glorious stuff. We created Dubai. Have you ever been to Dubai? Dubai, that's like, it's in the middle of nothing, all right? There's just a desert and all of a sudden, boom, and they created these houses that live out in an island shaped like a palm tree in the middle of water. We just created that right off the top. We're like, I should live in a home on a palm in the middle of the ocean. Let's do that. And we just did it. We imagined that. We imagined we have yachts. You ever been on a yacht? Like, and just like coasting on a yacht, just like, what's up, players? Drinking like some grape juice and eating some crackers, just be like, I'm on an ocean freaking yacht. Have you been to Hawaii? Right? Listen, whoever goes to Hawaii wants to come back. When you go, it's over. You know you've changed flights coming back from Hawaii. Guaranteed you've got, I'm supposed to go back Friday, that sucks. I'm gonna go back next Thursday. Honey, can we change our flights? Why do you do that? Because mankind created Hawaii. Well, I mean, it was there, but we did some cool stuff with it. We created hotels on the thing and swimming with dolphins. We've imagined a lot. And picture the greatest thing you can imagine, the greatest pleasure, the greatest joy, the greatest retreat, the greatest delight, the greatest awe. We've created it. And he says, you don't even know what he's got for you. What he has in the new creation, what the Bible oftentimes calls heaven, which is vastly different than you think it is. And you've heard me rant on this before, so we don't have time to get into it, but it's not a disembodied spirit world where everything's stark white like a big glass Apple store and we're all just wearing, long choir robes and singing forever and ever and ever and ever, because some of you are like, I got a bad voice and that sounds boring. I can't understand. I don't like clouds. I don't like babies. I don't like harps. I don't like diapers. Nothing about heaven seems legit. You've been cast this terrible vision of heaven, and he just said, you don't even understand, man, what is waiting for people who believed in Jesus. You can't even imagine how good it is, how beautiful it is. There's no more pain. There's no more crying. There's no more tears. There's nothing. And we have these pointers in this life now where we're like, okay, how do I, so yesterday I woke up and I'm doing some work on my island, and my kids were watching Hook. I don't know if you've seen the movie Hook, Steven Spielberg back in the day. It's about old Peter Pan, how he's, and then he goes to Neverland, and the whole thing is like, okay, you're in Neverland, and you're not supposed to have kids because you're never supposed to grow old, and you gotta fly, Peter, you gotta fly, Peter. Peter fly. And Julia Roberts is like, Peter fly, Peter fly. And she's like the little Tinkerbell, and he kisses these three mermaids, which my kids were like, what's going on? I don't understand. And so there's all these like crazy things, and it's this adventure, it's this crazy. Now, I'm sitting there listening to Peter Pan unfold, and my kids' hearts are kind of getting welled up in the adventure, and I'm writing a sermon on this verse, and I begin to realize, listen, you know what's stitched into you? Do you know why you love those stories? Because you want them to be true. You want to be able to never grow old. You want to be able to fly. You want the beast to be turned by the love of somebody who has unconditional love for them, even though they don't deserve it. You want that about you. You want these things to be true. And listen to me. Here are your two options. If you aren't the mature man in the analogy, if you are someone who says, I don't believe in God, I don't believe in Christianity, I don't believe in heaven, I don't believe in the life of the Spirit, I don't believe in any of those things, then here's what Peter Pan is, man. It's a cold joke that says, hey, listen, none of this is true, but you can have an adventure, and it's escapism by definition. But if Christianity is true, here's what's crazy. If Christianity is true, then it says, no, the reason you want that is because there is a place where you will never grow old. There is a place where you can fly. There is a place where the beast gets turned over by someone. That's built into you because that's your glory. That's what he's designed you for. That's a world that you can't even imagine right now how good it is. And he's created that for who? For everybody who's believed in Jesus. That's the point. For people who what? Look at what he says. None of the rulers of this age understand this, for if they had, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. And then he says, as is written, what no eye see, nor ears heard, nor the heart of man imagine, what God has prepared, this beautiful preparation, this beautiful place of new creation. But who's it for? Is it for the smartest? Is it for the doctrinally sound? Is it for the people who don't smoke and don't, what did my grandfather used to say? Don't smoke, don't chew, and don't go with girls who do. No idea what that means. But anyways, is it for all these moral people, these religious people, these righteous people, all of them, they get to go to the glory. They get to go to the place that God prepared beforehand for them. No, it's for what? For those who, what? Love him. Do you? No, I'm not talking about do you just know him. I'm not talking about do you know about him. I'm not talking, do you love him? Like actually have affection and delight for him, because that's who this glory is prepared for. Only people who love God through Jesus Christ, go to this place, like love him, like actually delight in him, not just duty. And you can think about your own marriage if you want to understand the difference. Some of you, you're married out of duty. I will stay with this woman because that's a covenant before the Lord. And then some of you are like, you actually delight. And I got to be honest with you, Aaron and I, listen, we're not I'm close. She's not perfect. And so the reality is this, man. What? We have had struggles in our marriage before. She's doesn't understand certain things. So we've had battles. All right, we go through seasons. Don't look up at me and say, not that any of you will. Oh, I wish I had his marriage or whatever. Listen, our marriage has been through it. My wife was sick for a while. We've done a lot of things. I'm not easy to live with. All right, you're talking about someone who literally has like diagnosed Tourette syndrome and obsessive compulsive disorder. What do you think that's like? Like I know a lot of you people probably fantasize my life a lot, all right? You're like, I wish I had his life. But when you're sleeping at night and you're already in bed and I come in, bang, knock things over. Can you shut up? I'm trying to sleep. Sorry. Right? That's what she deals with. I literally have obsessive compulsive disorder. This is what this means. Last week I got into bed, I lay down, I'm sitting there, I got my book. She's already been there for a while. I have my, of course, I turn the light on. Bing! All right, well, you sleeping? Didn't know. All right? It's 11 o'clock at night, and I have a craving for chips. So what do? Now, most normal people can just bury that nonsense. Just like, I feel like chips. Well, this is not rational. It's 11 p.m. and I'm in bed, buried, move on with your life. That's what normal people do. Me, I'm up, putting my pants on, car keys, jacket. Where are you going? Going to get chips. Now, after being together for 20 years, she ain't even balk at it anymore. It's just like, yep. Right? And I drive 15 minutes to the closest store. The guy, it's so late, he won't even open, we have a relationship now. He won't even open his door because it's locked down. He just does this it's like he's Hannibal Lecter in there and you gotta hand him stuff through there's this metal drawer and you put stuff in it and then he shunks it. And so he's like, what do you want? I'm like, chips. Oh, yes. And he knows what chips I want. And he goes and he gets them and he stuffs them into this drawer and he hands them back to me. And then I hand him my debit card and he types it all in. And then I think I'm in a horror movie and someone's going to murder me. He can't help me, right? Because he's behind the glass and he's already freaking me out because he's doing the Hannibal Lecter thing. And I'm like, ah. And so just hurry up. And then I drive 15 minutes home. It's 11:30 at night before I sit back down. And I pour out the chips in a bowl, and I get into bed. Crunch. Crunch. What are you doing? She doesn't even bother anymore, because she just knows I'm messed up. What was I talking about? Oh, yeah. Yeah. What? Yeah, so I'm messed up, and my marriage isn't perfect. And some of you are like, man, all I have is duty. Like all I have is that moment where she says, you know what? It's 11:30 and he's chomping at chips, but I'll stay married to him, not out of delight in that moment, but out of duty. Out of I have to, it's covenant. But then there's moments once in a while where she actually delights in me. And she likes it, being married to me. Some of you, you only have the duty. And some of you, forget all that. Some of you have that relationship to God. You only have duty, man. You have duty. I'm going to obey him because if I don't obey him, he's going to give me cancer. And tell me you haven't thought like that before. You have. He's not good. He's not good. So you obey him, but you don't love him. But the new creation is designed and prepared for those who love him. And how do you know you love him? Because your heart has detached itself from the things of the world and so put yourself, listen, this isn't some sentimental romanticism. Like, hey, I want you to love him because love, it's so nice love. Doesn't everybody love each other? It's so great. That's not what he's talking about. This is a kind of, and I've cited this before. Thomas Chalmers years ago wrote a beautiful sermon. It's probably been the most influential sermon on me in my life, other than The Weight of Glory by C.S. Lewis. And Thomas Chalmers talks about the expulsive power of a new affection. That the reason that when they approach Jesus and they say, what's the greatest commandment? And he says, you have to love God with your whole heart, soul, mind, strength. You've heard that before. You got to love God. That's not just sentimental romanticism. He's saying the only way to dispossess your heart off this thing over here and loving it, the only way you can ever get rid of a sin is by loving something else more than you love the sin. You can't just dispossess a heart of an idol. You have to replace it with something more powerful. And so when he says, listen, I've told you, why did I move out to Vancouver? I was gonna go to Oxford. You know what my love is? Oxford. I wanna be at Oxford. I wanna study in the dusty, smelly old libraries where C.S. Lewis and Tolkien hung out. I wanna go there. They got nice, on my screensaver at work, it's a picture of Oxford. Still, it's the campus of Oxford. That's my dream. That's why I moved out here, man, 15 years ago. 2 years at Masters, go to Oxford, hang out with Lewis. But then what happened? You did. And I fell in love with you more than Oxford. It's the only thing that keeps me here. You have to love something more than you love the other object. And why Jesus tells you to love God is because if you don't love him more than you love money, then you will never be dispossessed of the idol of money, and it will destroy you, it will ruin you. Or your sexual exploitations. You could try to beat yourself into submission. I shall stop doing this, I shall stop doing this, I shall stop doing this. That's not the solution, man. You gotta love Jesus more than you love promiscuity. Your materialism, whatever it is, this is the solution. And when you do this well, he's prepared something for you. And the beauty of it is this, all that power from the new creation, we'll talk about this next week, all that beautiful reality that's there, that pleasure, that delight, what Paul is doing is he's saying, the crazy thing is, it's already come from there down into the present, in the spirit. Now go live in it. You don't have to wait for the power and the beauty and the joy, because the Spirit has been given in the present as a deposit in your life to bring about love, joy, obedience, commitment, total flourishing. Father, my prayer is that as we gather as a church, we would begin to understand more and more the reality of how important it is that we don't just obey you, but that we love you. And there are hearts in here that are really good at obeying you, but they don't love you. They have no affection for you. They do not cherish you above everything else. They do not cherish the cross above everything else. They do not cherish Jesus above everything else. In fact, there's a pride about them and elitism about them because they haven't understood the humility that the cross brings. And Paul just keeps coming back over and over. He did this for our glory. Let that humble you rather than make you feel like you're special among the people of God. You are special among the world, but it's only because what he did. It's not because you're smart. It's not because you're advanced. It's not because you're beautiful. Jesus, humble us, the reality of the cross. Let it pierce our heart and our minds, and let us actually live right now for the future glory that we are going to experience. Because everything we do now is going to echo out. Every time we are not idolatrous, not greedy, that we discipline ourselves in the areas of our life, that stuff is going to impact how we experience glory. Let that motivate us in the present to honor you in all things. Change us on the spot, and let us draw all those among us into this beautiful reality. In Jesus' good name we pray. Amen.